Well, good morning. Welcome to Christ Table. My name is Kevin Young. I have the privilege of serving here at Christ Table as lead clergy. If you'd like to know more about Christ Table, all that you need to do is visit that URL that is right there, www.christstable.today. If you'd like to know more about this study in particular, the URL right there in front of me, go.christstable.today/divinecomedy is where you're going to find information about this study in particular. We have at that website a free PDF that has all of the curriculum for this study that you can download, that you can walk through, has some extra information to help you go deeper, as well as some reflection questions to help you consider how to apply and think about some of these topics as we walk through them. That's absolutely free there at that URL. If you would like a printed copy, we have boxes that include a printed copy of that Bible curriculum, as well as some other resources and gifts in there as well. So here is a look at the curriculum that's in there. So you can get that all at that URL. Just click on the button there on that says get the box that's on that URL, and then we'll get that off to you ASAP so that you can participate with us in this study. I also want to make sure that you are aware of this book if you're not already. If you are on a journey of discovery or of rediscovery, of deconstruction or reconstruction, considering your faith, know somebody who is, maybe somebody who's disappointed, disillusioned, done with the church or with Christianity, then this is probably going to be a phenomenal resource that is written directly to that individual. You can find out more information by going to drkevinyoung.com. And why don't we just go ahead and get into today's study? We're looking into the text of Matthew. So we're in Luke chapter 13, verses 31 through 33. And here we're going to look into Jesus' humor and sarcasm and wit in regard to a specific individual, Herod. For many of us, Herod will not be an unfamiliar name, probably mostly because Herod's name shows up in the Christmas story. The name Herod was larger than life in the time period that Jesus was here in first century Galilee. And even now today, 2,000 years later, you can't visit Israel without seeing Herod's fingerprints everywhere. So a couple of things that we want to get out of the way, though, before we jump into this text today is that Herod is a name that is used by multiple people in the same family during this time period. So there's Herod the Great, there's Herod Antipas, there are other Herods. The Herod that we are going to be speaking about today is Herod Antipas, which was the son of Herod the Great. Almost all the mentions in Scripture of Herod are of Herod Antipas, though sometimes it may say Herod the Tetrarch instead, or King Herod. This is who they're referring to as Herod Antipas. And he was not a great individual. He used any means necessary in order to maintain power and to prevent anybody else from in any way, shape, or form coming close to being able to take any of that power or control away from him, which means you didn't even have to be trying if you were in a position to be able to do that. So that meant that Herod utilized wives and exes, brothers, children. All of these individuals in the family were caught in a tangled web of drama and trauma and even murder in order for Herod to maintain power. And if he was willing to do that with his own family, you know that he was willing to do that with anybody. So Herod Antipas was essentially the leader, the king, the tetrarch of Galilee. And so Galilee, that area that Jesus spends almost all of his time in his ministry. And so he is in and out of Herod's business all the time in his ministry. And so he is in and out of Herod's business all the time. So Luke chapter 13 is no exception to that pattern. At that time, some Pharisees said to Jesus, "Get away from here," meaning this area of Galilee, "if you want to live. Herod Antipas wants to kill you. Jesus replied, go tell that fox that I will keep on casting out demons. I will keep on healing people today and tomorrow. And then the third day, I will accomplish my purpose. Yes, today, tomorrow, and the next day, I must proceed on my way. For it wouldn't do for a prophet of God to be killed, except in Jerusalem. And so Jesus has on a sassy britches here. Pharisees come to him and say, you really want to get out of here? Herod Antipas wants to kill you. And Jesus says, I'm here for 3 days. He can just wait for me to leave. You can wait for me to leave. I've got business to do. I've got demons to cast out. I've got meals to eat. I've got miracles to attend to. And I mean, these kinds of deaths, they have to happen in Jerusalem, not here. That's the way that it goes. Doesn't Herod know the history and the way these things work? If he's going to kill me, he's just gonna have to wait until I get to Jerusalem, until I have time for this. He's just gonna have to push your patient button, Herod. Sassy. I love this. Jesus obviously had a very contentious relationship with the Pharisees, but here it seems as though the Pharisees are giving him inside information. Jesus, just so you know, Herod has it out for you. Now, I got to admit, reading up on this, looking at scholars, people are split. Some people say that the Pharisees weren't all bad. And I think actually that's very true. And that this could have been an attempt to try to diffuse all of the things that were contentious, that they disliked about Jesus, or it could well be, because we know that there were some Pharisees that were amenable to Jesus. And so it could well be that it was some of the Pharisees that were amenable to Jesus that were giving him some inside information so that he could skedaddle, which is a very technical theological term, so that Jesus could skedaddle before this mafia hit was taken out on Jesus. It could well be that the Pharisees are playing both sides here. Why do they know about this? Well, they know about this because they are in cahoots with Herod. They're doing what they have to do in order to maintain power, which is to appease Herod, the person in power. We see this today, right? I mean, we see religious leaders even today appeasing the Herods that are in power in the U.S. in order to maintain their own power. It's deplorable then. It's deplorable now. Jesus, though, uses this phrase in regard to Herod. In fact, you see it there right after the paragraph break. Go tell that fox that I will keep on doing this. This would have been a very witty and sarcastic name or title or designation given for Herod, that fox, that was not just any random animal. It would have carried with it, if not maybe humor, it certainly would have carried with it a dark humor bordering on sarcasm, also just like turning that knife, poking a caged bear. It would have, for people who heard that Jesus called Herod that fox, they would have laughed at this. They would have roared at the idea that Jesus, to the Pharisees, referred to Herod as that fox, knowing that this is going to, from the Pharisees, get back to Herod, that Jesus has referred to him as a fox, which is just going to make Herod all the angrier at Jesus. And people are going to love this because no one liked Herod, but they all feared Herod. In rabbinic literature, foxes carried, as many things do in scripture and in the texts of the Hebrew scriptures, they carry with them a lot of symbolism beyond just the word or here the animal itself. And in rabbinic literature, foxes symbolized both cleverness and insignificance. And so the fact that Jesus chooses this particular animal for Herod would have just made the crowd who heard that Jesus had said this, or anyone who was standing around, it would have made them snicker and chuckle. And then whenever the Pharisees were gone, it probably would have made them roar. Because yes, Herod was well known for being clever, and foxes are clever, but it carried with it this additional idea of also being very insignificant. Whenever people are imagining the great animals, foxes are not usually on that list. Even when people are imagining the smart animals, foxes usually aren't on the list of wise animals, maybe devious in a clever way, but that's usually not necessarily seen as being an attribute that most people would attain to be clever in a way that was to bring harm to other people. But the fact that it carries with it this idea of insignificance as well, because of the fact that fox is a devious, clever animal that really has no use and also no reputation beyond that. So it's rather insignificant in rabbinic literature. It's rather insignificant in the Bible, the text of Scripture itself, and became insignificant in thinking in those great theologians and thinkers, the rabbis of the past. And so the fact that Jesus refers to Herod, who was so self-important as to literally murder over and again anyone who was considered a rival or a threat or who spoke against him, John the Baptist, one of those things that Herod put a hit out on, would have really, really, really annoyed Herod to no end, and really, really, really just guffawed all of the people who did not like Herod at all. He's clever, yes, but he's insignificant. But beyond that, one of the things that we also know is that this reference would have reminded listeners of the fox's lower status, even in animal hierarchies. So the Midrash talked a lot about just this low status. And Herod has he's Jewish in his background and his roots and his history. And so Herod understood this and certainly was surrounded by people who understood this, that even as animals and small animals that scurry around and are clever, foxes, their status in the hierarchy was really low. And Herod was all about his own status. Everything that Herod did was about maintaining his own status and protecting his own status. And so to be compared by Jesus to a fox, that fox, insignificant, low status, everybody would have thought it was funny, except Herod and anybody around Herod who didn't want to be seen laughing at it. But it wasn't just an insult, which it was, but it wasn't just that. It also specifically contrasted with this lion imagery associated with true Jewish kingship. You know, you remember I said that Herod went by several different designations. Herod Antipas, Herod the Tetrarch, which I think, as I recall, means essentially an area, a quadrant. But the one that I think he most enjoyed, and which we do see in Scripture, is this King Herod. Caesar Augustus was technically the king, but Herod ruled at the pleasure and under Caesar Augustus, and would use that title or require other people to use that title for him as well. He thought of himself in that way, but he was not a Jewish king. In fact, if you will remember back to your Christmas story, what are the wise men, the Magi, whenever they arrive in Jerusalem, what is their question? Where is this king of the Jews that has been born? For we have seen a star rise in the east, and of the Jews that has been born, for we have seen a star rise in the east. And the prophecies seem to foretell that this could indicate that a new king is born. And Herod craftily and cleverly sends them to go find this newborn king and then come back and tell them so that he can go and worship. Which, clever Herod, no way he's going to do that. He doesn't want to be insignificant, and a new king that's born would mean the end of his significance, especially one that was a true king of the Jews, of which he was not, and he knew he was not. So whenever they go home a different way and he realizes that he has been duped, he puts a hit out on all of the young children, the text of Matthew tells us, because he is not willing to give up that title of king, even though he knew that he wasn't. And so in comparison with David, with the greats, Solomon, his son, was also considered a great. Herod was the opposite of that, and everybody knew it, even Herod himself. And so we see this funny contrast between what a king should be, a lion. This is the way it's spoken of, both in rabbinic literature as well as in the text of Scripture itself. Genesis 49:9 speaks of this lion. But beyond that, what we also see is that there is a lot of humor in this dramatic, ironic, opposite comparison of a fox to a lion. Well, that's all the time that we have for today. Make sure that you take a look at those questions that are in the materials online, or if you've gotten the box that are in the curriculum in the box, go.christstable.today/divinecomedy. And I will look forward to being with you tomorrow as we continue on our study